in the curriculum. We could identify maybe a brand new teacher after the first marking period, they're 4 weeks behind where they're supposed to be. The only way we would know that is by analyzing gradebooks and looking at their lesson plans. So this is the academic approach that Dr. Cosentino primarily drove last summer with our administrative team. And then last year, we spent the time going through it with our teachers, training them on it, laying out the expectations for them, and they responded brilliantly to it. Linkit. Linkit is our data management warehousing system. It's something we purchased with a grant 2 years ago. And what it does is basically we upload these gigantic Excel sheets the state gives us after standardized testing, and Linkit turns it into usable reports for us. These are things that we used to, in my principal days, the scores would come out and I would sit with a calculator, a ruler, and a pencil and count up how many students were proficient, how many weren't. We spend time sorting the assessments. The columns on the Excel sheet, if you use Excel, go to Dvsd by the time you're through, everything that's included. Now we could upload them into this data management system and actually get viable reports that come out. We could see results for individual grade levels. We could see things for cohorts of students. We could see down to individual anchors and how our students perform. So I just wanted to include just a few examples. So we ran, and Mrs. Sweller has become kind of our Linkit expert. She runs a lot of these for us. Each building, we churned out reports that were anywhere in length from 100 to 189 pages, and 2 reports for each building, each tested building. So 6 buildings with 2 of almost 200-page reports that we then whittle down to give to our principals so they could talk to their teachers about it. This is an example of one report that comes out. This is English Language Arts achievement across all grades 3 through 8. It gives us, if your vision is not great, and I'm standing right next to it, but you're not, it gives us 5 years worth of data so that we could look not only at last year, but we could go back to pre-pandemic and see if we have learning gaps, if there's losses that we haven't yet compensated from, or areas that we have compensated. And that allows us to kind of get a big picture of how our students are performing across buildings with their proficiency. But we could see this for each building, or we could see it district-wide. This is another way that we could look at our data. So this would be looking at one elementary school and then comparing it to the other 2 elementary schools. We could do that and toggle however we'd like to see how is their performance stacking up against the other buildings. And it's not in a competitive nature, it's in a collaborative spirit. So that a building who may be struggling on an assessment in a grade level, we can then go and say, okay, we can team them up with teachers from another elementary school and say, what are you guys doing differently than what we're doing? Because historically, we're underperforming. We could run proficiency by program. By program, you would sometimes hear it referred to as a subgroup. So we can look at our special education students, our 504 students, our free and reduced lunch students, or our English language learners. So we could hone in specifically on any groups that may be struggling. And we could do that again across grade levels and assessments. Last, we could look at cohort achievement. So you could take the same group of students that were in 3rd grade last year, or 2 years ago, and then see how did the same group of students perform in 4th grade, and see did that group perform better or perform worse than they did the previous year. So that's very interesting because every group of students is different. So 4th grade may go up 1 year and it may go down the next year, but that's 2 entirely different groups of students. When you look at cohorts, you're seeing the same group of students move across time. So it's another data point that we could look at to see if our instruction is being effective. Okay. Last, Linkit can go into what we call the weeds, where it actually gets into anchor achievement. So it breaks down on the various PSSA tests, the parts of the test. And then we can see what percentage of our students are proficient on the different parts of the test for any grade level and any test. So that's analyzing by anchor. This is the type of information that teachers love because they want to see, is there a particular part of the test that the students are underperforming on so they know next year, commit a little bit more time, look at how they taught it. You know, did they give a project that took too much time? There's a lot of different ways to look at it to see if they could be more successful. So those are just some of the reports that we get on Linkit. Another tool we use is what's called eMetric. eMetric is an online system that allows teachers to look specifically at students and get into those weeds, the anchors and the specific parts of the test, and see how kids are performing across all grade levels and exams. We can look at it as a group summary. So we can look at the entire school district. This is biology keystone. Bless you. The biology keystone, like literature and algebra, is given in 2 modules. Each module has different content that's expected of it. So we could look at module 1, 4 different anchors. How did our students perform across the board? Then we could look at mod 2, 4 anchors. How did they perform across the board? Where did we lack in instruction? Where did we really blow the doors off so that we can emulate that? This is PSSA 4th grade. I just pulled random reports. There's nothing to look at on these except what we look at, basically. Mean percent correct. So again, we could look at every single state standard or assessment anchor, and it'll show us what is the average amongst all students in 4th grade, either by district or by individual building. How did they perform on each of those assessment anchors? So we can look at any that are lower than the other ones and see, is there an issue? Sometimes we look and maybe they gave less questions on that one. So each question you get wrong has a greater impact. Maybe something we did really well on had a lot of questions and our kids still got a lot wrong, but the percentage looked better. Those are the types of things we have to look at to make sure that it's not just about the numbers on the exam, that it's the kids actually learning the material, which is what our goal is. Here's an individual student report out of eMetric. So this is an ELA, all right? Student who performed proficient, it gives what score they got, what their level was, but then it takes that same information that we could look at by district or by building or by grade level and break it down to the individual student. And again, this is what teachers like to see. It actually gives you the number of points the student earned and the number of points that were available for each section. So even as a teacher, you would be able to see this and say, okay, for E3.F, I know there are 25 questions asked there, and maybe I'm only instructing that for 3 weeks. I might need to do 5 weeks of that because it's a significant part of the test. Likewise, you may have an anchor that there's only going to be 3 questions asked out of an entire test that takes 2 days, and you're spending a month on it. You don't need to spend a month on that particular anchor. You can move on to other content, and our teachers are really adopting to that mindset, and they're starting to figure out kind of the rules to the game that are out there. PVAS. Some of you guys have heard me talk about PVAS. I do love my growth measures. So the Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System. This is the state's complex algorithm that measures whether or not students are growing year to year. And what I do is I go to each individual building in the month of December, and I talk to all the teachers that have PVAS scores, and I explain the system to them year after year. I do it for the principals, I do it for the teachers, just so they keep hearing the same messaging. But essentially, if you're wondering how growth is measured, because there's a lot of misconceptions about growth, and I am the biggest offender. When I was high school principal, our growth scores were abysmal. You can score for your building anywhere from 50 to 100. And in the high school, you have literature, biology, and algebra. And our PVAS scores were 50, 50, and 53, as bad as it could be. And I said, well, our kids score really well, so clearly they can't grow. So I'm okay with the fact our growth scores stink. And at some point, I put that aside and said, maybe I need to learn a little bit more about this as I saw other schools succeeding. And once we started to learn about PVAS, again, it started to make sense. What PVAS does is it takes a student, let's say 2 years ago, who was a 7th grader. And let's say that 7th grader scored in the 80th percentile. What it's going to do is it's going to take the hundreds of thousands of 7th graders across the state of Pennsylvania that scored in that same percentile, and it looks at how those kids did in 8th grade, okay? And it's going to create a bell curve. What is the average score that all those 7th graders scored when they went to 8th grade? And then it takes our student at Delaware Valley, and all it does is project where they're going to land. If they do better, that shows growth. If they don't do as well, then that doesn't show growth. But growth doesn't mean if a kid scores in the 99th percentile that they have to score in the 100th percentile the next year. It's a different test. It's not the same information. It's not the same content. I told teachers today, even when a student's not growing, all that means is that the expected performance of the student was less than that 50 on the bell curve. They did not score where the system projected them to score. Does that make sense? That's a lot. I talk fast, but it's okay. So what the system does is it takes that for our district. We can look at our district. We can look at each individual building. We can look at each individual grade. We can look at each individual teacher, and we can look at each individual student. This is part of the teacher's evaluation. So we really try to coach them up as much as possible so that they can do as well as possible for themselves, as well as helping out their building score, which we will get to shortly. So I just wanted to show you briefly what's on the Dvsd website. So I just went to the public website so that anybody could get to it, anybody could have access. It looks the same on our end, but we have more information where we could see our teachers, we could see our students and things like that, which isn't necessary for this. So what this colorful chart shows is what's called value-added growth. And what it does is it gives your grade level, this is the entire school district. So all the students in fourth grade for Delaware Valley, where did they land on this growth continuum? This dotted line in the middle is showing 1 year of academic growth. So in other words, if that student was projected to score at the 60th percentile, they scored at the 60th percentile, they would land right on that dotted line. If they do a little bit better, they start to creep to the right. If they do a little worse than that projected score, they creep a little bit to the left. So picture this in aggregate for every kid across our school district in each individual grade level. Because teachers also get this line just for their students, and that's what they're evaluated on. But we could look at it by teacher, by grade level, by building, or by district. I chose to look at the district. And you can see the grade levels and the subjects where we're having success with our growth of students, and you could also see some areas where we're not seeing growth of students. But here's the important thing to remember out of Dvsd. Growth is not what's called achievement. Achievement is the percentage of kids passing the PSSA. We are much less concerned about that. Obviously, we want as many kids to pass as possible, but our goal is for kids to perform better than their expectation. To us, that's much more noble to achieve. When we look at 7th grade math, our growth was well below, but our passing percentage was actually significantly higher than last year. But the passing percentage, they were supposed to score better than they did. We, again, going back to a high school example, our honors 10 teachers, which gives the literature keystone, every kid in their class passed the keystone exam, no problem. Most of them were proficient, some were advanced, but their Dvsd scores were all in the red. And we were like, how does that make sense? How are they not growing kids if all their kids are passing the test and a lot of them are scoring advanced? So we talked to the teachers and we said, what do you guys think it is? And they were like, I don't know, the kids are passing. So we started talking. The literature test has a writing component on it. And we said, how much time do you spend on the writing component? And they said, none. We said, what do you mean none? It's like a quarter of the test. It's too easy for the honors kids. We have them writing college essays and more important things. They don't need to worry about that. And we were like, could you just teach them how to write this one time to see? And they were like, all right, we'll do it. The very next year, scores went off the roof. They just never had taught the kids that skill set. And all of a sudden, the growth shot through the roof. So you had kids scoring low advanced that were supposed to be scoring high advanced. And that's how growth works as compared to achievement. One of the things I like about this, and again, this is on the public site, so anybody could get to it. You can toggle different years, as well as, you can turn off PSSAs or keystones. It's nice to keep it all. But when we just go back to 2023, it stacks them on top of one another. So you could see growth in math in 2023 compared to growth in math in 2024, which we liked a lot of that. ELA, again, 4 through 8, and then all the grades put together. You could see what 2023 looked like. Across all grades was buried in the well below. And then look at 2024, which had a pretty seismic shift, quite frankly, in terms of the growth performance of our students. Science 4 and 8, Science 4 and 8 this past year. And then for the Keystone exams, the high schools had it figured out for a bit. So we're happy that they're maintaining the significant growth that the students are seeing. But obviously, it still takes work to maintain that. Nothing comes automatically. So next, this is another public-facing website that rates, evaluates, however you want to look at it. Every school district in Pennsylvania, including cyber charter schools, I'd highly recommend you take a look at them. Future Ready PA Index, it's the state's report card, as they call it. But it gives a lot of good information. It gives you assessment data, gives you career readiness indicators, it gives you graduation rates, it gives you attendance rates, it gives you CTE information. There's a lot on the Future Ready Index that are pretty good, okay? So we're just gonna take a quick look at Future Ready. And again, it's a simple Google to find. Pick a school, because I just want to show you what one looks like. I don't have any particular one in mind.
High school.
Okay. So this is what happens when you open it up. You get to school performance. You can do school fastbacks. So if you're ever looking at demographics of a school in our district, you could just click fastbacks, or you could do district fastbacks, which is pretty useful when, again, looking for any type of information. So the first dashboard, it has different state assessment measures. Basically, to make it as simplistic as possible, up arrows is anywhere where the school did better than last year. And then the colors are in comparison to the state's interim target goals. So the state has goals they want schools to meet each year. If you're not meeting those goals, you end up in red in these little bubbles. And if you're meeting the goals, you end up in green in the middle like these. Okay. And if you are in blue, it means you're exceeding the growth measure from the state. And when we look a little bit more in depth, they actually color them up for you. And then they give you the specific metrics of the three exams. Again, the high school, you have your English, your literature keystone, your algebra 1 keystone, your bio keystone. For elementary schools, it'll have ELA PSSA. It's all the grades put together. So it's 3 through 5, and in the middle school, 6 through 8. It has the statewide average. The statewide average is all the tests 3 through Keystone. So if we looked at every school, you would see the same statewide average, whether it's a middle school, elementary school, or a high school. It's all going to be the same. Okay, so comparing this to this, it looks good, but it's not authentic because, again, that statewide average is all the assessments. This is just hours in the high school for that. And then it has your PVOS score. So for the high school, we were happy that for the second year in a row, they were able to score 100 as their growth measure. And I have some information at the end. I won't spoil it yet about how some other buildings did, but we'll get there shortly. So Future Ready, a lot of good information, and you can compare any school to each other, both within our district and outside the Delaware Valley School District. So now I just wanted to show performance data. I took 2022-23 and compared it to 23-24, just so you can get a side-by-side comparison of how our schools perform. So here's the high school, your 3 Keystone exams. As you can see, increases across all 3. Growth, as I said, we're at 100 last year, and they were able to maintain that 100. The Algebra 1 looks super impressive. If you have a sick memory and could remember our data presentation last year, that 46.1 is inauthentic. It's related back to COVID and grade 8 Algebra 1 students. So we're not taking credit that there was some miraculous job in algebra. This is high for us, but it's more in line to where we historically are. It's higher. It's not 30% higher, as good as that looks. Here's Delaware Valley Middle School. Grade 6 ELA 7 and 8. Then you can see math, then you can see science. Science, if you remember, is only given in 8th grade in the middle schools. So you can take a look at their year-to-year comparison. Here's Dingman Delaware Middle School. Remember, we're at achievement. So this is the percentage of proficient and advanced student on each respective PSSA exam, year-to-year. DVE. DDE. Shohola. And now growth. So this is going back to that 50 to 100 scale. that each building has on the Future Ready Index. So if you looked up each school on that Future Ready Index, these are the numbers compiled for you for each of our 6 buildings. You'll notice it's only 6 buildings because the primary school doesn't have standardized test data. That's why DDPS is missing. High school, 100 across the board. We were really proud of and ecstatic about the fact that Dingman's Middle School also hit 100 across the board, including a very significant jump in their ELA growth, which when you look at the individual grade levels, each grade level had if you looked at that PBOS page, a lot of red to dark blue, that'll get you a good score. So they were very proud of themselves for that, and they should be. Building scores. Building scores are something that the state of Pennsylvania does for every single building that has any type of data in it. A primary school can have a building score. It's not counted on a teacher's evaluation. So again, we'll just focus on our other 6. But there are different pieces to what goes into a building score. And again, it's out of a scale of 100. This one goes less than 50, though. Here's how it's broken down. Academic achievement, that's your percentage proficient and advanced. As you can see, ELA and math are 15 points apiece. Science is 10 points. Then you have your academic growth. That's your PBOS. 15, 15, 10. Same value, okay? So we're already at 80 out of 100 points are being determined by performance on standardized tests in some way, shape, or form. The last 20 percentage points, the attendance rate in your building. If you remember last year, I regularly was updating you on our attendance and how it was going up and higher than the previous year. And we ended up higher in every single building, which is good news coming shortly. And then graduation rate. Only the high school gets a graduation rate, okay? All the other buildings get the attendance rate of 20. The good thing about the attendance rate is it's the only data in building score that's a lagging indicator, meaning our building score this year uses the attendance rate from 22-23, which means that next year we already know our attendance rates are going to be higher because of those thousands of periods that we saved last year by having kids in school more often. Every single building, every single checkpoint, including the end of the year, saw increases in student attendance last year. So that's something we're looking forward to. Here's building scores. We like building scores because it is an all-encompassing look at your growth, your achievement, as well as your attendance, and in the high school's case, the graduation rate. So as you can see, all 6 schools that have building scores saw, in some cases, a substantial increase in their building score, but in all cases, an increase in their building scores, which we were very proud of. This is also something that goes on teacher evaluations. So it's something that obviously teachers like to see. And when we discuss this and we talk to our principals, we make sure that even though 80% of it is standardized test data, celebrate your specials teachers. Because when we talk to kids, why do you like coming to school? Art class, music class, phys ed class, recess. We don't have a teacher for recess, but we could still celebrate it. But those things, the fun things that principals do or librarians do to make kids want to come to school is what gets them this type of performance. Because if kids don't like coming to school and they choose not to, they're not going to perform well on tests because they're missing that content, especially when teachers are honing in on exactly what needs to be asked. So the more often they're in school, the better off we are. And when we told our principals, you know, you do spirit games at the end of homecoming week across the district, you give up that one afternoon where kids get to have fun and play games and be competitive. You might have just bought tens of hours of instruction because those kids are coming to school to take part in those events. And we feel really strongly about that cultural element contributing to the success that the buildings are having. The quick advanced placement summary. Equity and excellence is an indicator that's very important for different types of ranking systems across the country. 35% is the percentage of seniors that graduated last year taking and passing, score of 3, 4, or 5, at least one advanced placement exam. It's a very good number for us. We would like to continue to see it get larger. These other results we were very happy with as well. The total number of students taking AP exams was 343. That number used to be in the double digits, 20s and 30s, and not now kind of long ago, but 20 years ago, because there was a gatekeeper mentality that AP classes were only for certain kids. And that's something we philosophically disagreed with very, very strongly. And we wanted to open up those high-level classes to any student in the high school that wanted to take them. We offer them to freshmen now, we offer them to senior, and we tell them, take courses that interest you. If you're an art kid, there's AP Art History. There's 3 different studio art AP classes you can take that could potentially apply for college credit. We offer 31 different advanced placement courses, and we really believe there's something for everybody in that mix. We feel strongly about that. This is the 5-year chart of the percentage of students passing AP exams. As you can see, last year, 84% of the kids who took AP exams passed the AP exam. And just to go back, the number of students taking AP exams was higher than the previous year, and the number of exams taken was higher than the previous year. So we didn't trim down the numbers to get a higher percentage. We increased those denominators, and the kids responded, and more passed than they had before, which we were very, very happy about. NOCD performance. The NOCD is the end of course assessment that all career tech kids take after 3 years in their respective subject: automotive, building, construction, trade, early childhood education, culinary arts, electrical, health assisting, business, and marketing. Here's a chart. Very similar to all other standardized tests. You have advanced, competent, basic, or did not take the test. Okay. As you can see, nice solid performance there. And I have a summary of those NOCDs coming up in a slide or two. 23, 24, just some of the academic accolades. I chose not to put in the things that Mr. DeLauro puts in his graduation speech. The Global Award for Foreign Language, the Best Community and Music Awards, the #1 FBLA program in the state, multiple OM teams performing at Worlds, including a world champion. They're there and we've talked about them, okay? But we did want to recognize that as the fall came through, we did get various recognitions for our buildings that they were quite proud of, and obviously we were quite proud of as well. So, obviously, the first thing we focus on, and it's funny, when the central office talks to our building principals and we say, okay, here's your data, what did you think of it? They always start with the negative. They always identify and hone right in, and Mrs. Alsmer is smirking because she knows she's one of them. They always hone in on, I'm really disappointed here. They could have phenomenal results, but they're going to find that one thing, and that's great because that's what we need to focus on because we do the same. So as we saw on that PBOS screen, we quickly identified that we did not see growth in 5th grade ELA that we would like to see. So we have an action plan in terms of addressing 5th grade ELA growth. We weren't thrilled with our 7th grade mathematics lack of growth as well. Performance, as I said, was good, not the growth though. So our kids are passing the test at a better rate, but not where they should be passing the test, which is important for us to recognize and see what the problem is. So we have an action plan for each of those. Subgroups. There were, in those Linkit reports, different groups of students you can look at diagnostically. What we saw was our lowest 20% of learners, in other words, kids who scored in the lowest quintile of standardized tests. We were not happy with their growth targets, not every single grade, but too many that were lower than they should be. And I think it ties into this next bullet point that we saw an increase in the number of below basic scores. In, I don't want to say most grade levels, but we saw too many that we were comfortable with because we saw an increase in proficient and advanced, but it seemed like some of the basic kids might have dropped into below basic, and we don't want that either. And obviously that's going to hurt growth scores as well. But those are clearly our struggling learners that may need more support, and they may need different programs, different interventions in order to make sure they're not falling behind, particularly in those younger grade levels. The 3rd grade ELA PSSA is a big indicator. The 7th grade math PSSA is a huge indicator for future success in algebra and beyond. So those are things that we really try to hone in on and have an actionable plan to monitor throughout the year to see if we can show improvement. Team performance. Again, using PBOS and Linkit, we could get down into individual grade levels and individual buildings. So we may see at the district level, 4th grade did great in math. But what if one of our elementary schools, 4th grade, didn't do great? The 2 buildings did fantastic and one didn't do that well. That might be a 4th grade team that we have an issue with that we would have to address. And we've identified those teams to speak to them to figure out exactly what the issue is. We start looking at the curriculum. That's always where we start. We believe our teachers are always teaching as hard as they can with as much passion as they can. But if you're not teaching the right material, it's not going to matter. We always use the example in math. For years, we were teaching our kids to count money, and it was not on the PSSA. it was on the PSSA the year before, and there was no analysis to see why our kids weren't doing well. They've never been taught the skill before. They were getting it taught in the wrong grade. So those little items you have to button up as you look through various curricula. And then we have a plan to support our teams. I wanted to throw this slide in there because as we're going through this year, there are a lot of mandates coming from the state of Pennsylvania that we're not thrilled with entirely. A lot to do with the unfunded nature of them, but also because they seem to be hitting the same groups of people with a lot of extraneous work. As we're trying to do all these other things, we have structured literacy coming to ELA. So that's going to be a change to the curriculum that we're going to be addressing next year, but it essentially is taking a different approach to how you teach the science of reading. We've done extensive administrative training this year. We've already started training our elementary ELA teachers. Our reading department chair has made herself very familiar with this. Our supervisor of academic services, Ms. Sweller, is a former reading specialist. We feel like we're in a good position, but it is going to be a shift, particularly at our elementary levels. But essentially, every ELA teacher from kindergarten through high school is expected to be able to teach the science of reading, which has primarily been reserved for reading specialists. So it's a paradigm shift that we have to shift with. Steele standards coming to all science curriculum. This is something we've really paid a lot of attention to in the last year and a half. We've gone to various intermediate units, some outside our own, because different intermediate units have different specialties. We met a wonderful director out of BCIU and IU 13 who's worked with us. She's coming. Dr. Cosentino booked her for our professional learning days to work with our science teachers. But it's a huge shift. It basically takes science from being something you read in a book or read an article about to being very inquisitive and hands-on in nature. It's what's called phenomenological study. So you take a phenomenon. Why, when you have a puddle on the ground, why does the water decrease over time? The students start with that phenomenon, and then they have to try to figure it out, with the teacher guiding them along the way through the process. It's great. It's great hands-on science. It is not how science is taught in public schools. So that is a monstrous paradigm shift. We believe the students are going to enjoy the shift, quite frankly. But number one, it's finding time in the elementary day for more science. And middle school, when kids start to get into content-specific science in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, how do you start weaving all those different content together to make this make sense for kids? It's something that we're really working hard to figure out the best approach to. The Science PSSA is moving from 4th to 5th grade. It is going to be piloted this year with the new Steele standards. They're going to be piloted, or what's called field tested, this year in 5th grade and in 8th grade. So the test is not going to count. Essentially, we'll still get scores, but it doesn't count for the kids, so they can see how kids do with the questions across the state. And then next year, it will count for 5th and 8th, and the biology keystone will be field testing it next school year. But those standards, regardless of how you feel about them, are active as of July 1, 2025.
So the 5th grade students this year
are getting it twice. You got it.
Oh, those poor kids.
The one thing I'll say, PDE has released items for the PSSA exams, so you can go in and actually just Google it and find it on SAS or in the toolkit for Steeles. The questions are much different than they used to be. So instead of being like, please describe what mitosis looks like, instead it's going to say, here's a chart about the population of deer and then the population of deer in January. Which of the answers best describes what's happening? So it's more skills-based in terms of what the kids are going to be learning and less based on memorization of vocabulary. So again, I think it's a philosophical good, but it is a substantial paradigm shift for how we're going to be thinking about science moving forward. And it is absolutely going to be a multi-year process. It's not going to happen overnight. You've been teaching science for 20 years. That's a big shift.
Yeah.
And it's okay, but it's going to take time. All standardized testing is moving to an online format. So we have time to test it, but we are all in as of this year that all PSSAs, which we have not done before, will be done on computers unless kids have accommodations. So we are having students take practice tests now so that they can learn how to use the tools that are in the system in DRC, the state's testing website, so that they know how to pull up a calculator. They know how to pull up a protractor or any other type of device. That's probably pretty old, but whatever. Maybe protractors are still. I didn't say like a sextant. That's a sailing on a ship. But all those tools are available in the system. We need to teach kids how to do it. And certainly your 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade is where we're most focused on making sure the kids know just how to handle it. Last but not least, there is not related to testing, but there's a mandatory half-year personal financial literacy course that will be mandated on all high school students as of 2026. So this is a course that everyone is going to be required to take that is in high school. And right now the language is complete. So the question is pass, don't pass, what do grades do? This is something, it's good that kids have personal financial literacy. It is slightly frustrating on districts who have very full schedules. And now you're essentially taking away a student's choice to take an elective by telling them they have to take this class. We've offered a personal financial literacy class in the business department for 20 years. So kids have had access to it, but the difference is now every kid is going to have to take it.
For 2026 graduates or 2026?
The 2026 school year, kids are going to have to take it. LEA decision on when it's given in high school, and there are various certifications that can teach the class. But I wanted to put that one up there because it may have staffing implications for us. When you have just from my experience as a high school principal, if you have a half-year class that every single student in the high school has to take, you're talking 16 sections of classes, because we do it for phys ed for every student in a grade level. Englishes that are full have 8 to 9, so you just divide it by 2. So there may be a staffing implication for that coming, but it's not for next school year. Next school year, we will write the curriculum, figure out what department to put it in. The business department is ready for it, but it's a matter of how we're going to teach it and where kids are going to take it, quite frankly. Areas of pride. These are the things we really liked that we saw this past year. 2 buildings for the first time ever had 100 growth score for all 3 tested subject areas. So that was the high school and Dingman Delaware Middle School. So really, really proud of them for that. The high school, the Delaware Valley Middle School and Delaware Valley Elementary School had an increase in passing percentage across all subject areas. So in the elementary school, you have ELA and math in 3rd, you have ELA, math, and science in 4th, and then you have ELA and math in 5th. Okay, so you have 7 tests that all 7, they went up. Or in the case of a middle school, you have 8 tests. All 8 tests went up. So that was excellent. Every building had an increased building score from 22-23 to 23-24. 18 of 18 growth indicators increased. So that chart I showed you with growth scores, every single indicator increased. There are 40 achievement indicators. So all the different grade levels, PSSAs or keystones. If you add up all the schools, there's 40 of them. 31 of the 40 grade levels and subjects went up from last year compared to the previous year. 91% of our NOCTI test takers scored competent or advanced. It was 79% in 22-23. Your handout has 86%. I counted in the non-test takers, but the state doesn't count them, so I changed it last minute. And this also does not count. But we did see an increase in our NOCTIs from 79% to 91%, which was substantial. And then, as I said, the equity and excellence score of 35 is pretty substantial. One other point of pride that I would feel neglectful if I didn't mention. Building scores. It's a gigantic Excel sheet that the state puts out. There are 2,737 schools on it, if I'm not mistaken. Okay? Elementary schools, again, cyber charters, public schools, magnet schools, all sorts of different schools. When you look at the list, Delaware Valley High School was the 24th highest building score in the entire state. And when you looked at the 23 schools above the high school, we were the 5th highest public non-magnet high school in the state of Pennsylvania. So a magnet high school is a public high school that gets to pick and choose what kids go to it. So one of the ones we looked at right out of the gates, you had to be an 8th grade student who had at least a 90% in your math, science, and English classes in 8th grade and 95% attendance. That's not, to me, a public school, but it's okay. It's not my judgment call. I don't care. I care about Delaware Valley. I put this chart together just to kind of give you an idea of the true public schools that were above us. where their building scores were compared to Delaware Valley High School, but I think most significantly, what percentage of students are economically challenged, which is also part of that Excel sheet that is public. It's on the webpage. 16%, 26.8, 20.9, 18.5. This would be your low socioeconomic students. Delaware Valley is 40.9% socioeconomically challenged. The data is clear as day that lower socioeconomic students, higher percentages of lower socio students result in lower test scores. That's not necessarily true, as the high school showed. So very, very proud of that. Curricular updates, which is part of our data presentation. Here's where we're at for this school year. We have 2 new courses planned for next school year. We'll show you what they are. There's a total of 76 curricula being revised, 6 new textbooks being adopted, which is pretty standard in a given year. Don't get nervous, you have it.
Teeny tiny.
I'll give you a full pager. It's pretty teeny tiny on the next page too.
Get my glasses. I'm so
All
proud.
right. You might notice there's not 76 boxes because some of these boxes combine multiple classes together. For example, World Studies, Concepts, and Advanced Placement. That's 3 curricula. Here they are listed. So one of the new courses we're starting, super excited for this, the art department. We've worked in conjunction with them over the last year to propose this. It's a digital content creation course with the investment that Dr. Pope was able to secure from our generous community for an outdoor digital scoreboard, as well as 2 indoor digital scoreboards, our journalism program moving to more podcasting, more live broadcasts on YouTube, as well as the expansive efforts from our art department currently for the marquee out front that they work with Mrs. Schaefer on and Mrs. Matarazzo on. We want to see kids making as much of that content as possible. It's the next era of digital marketing, essentially. So we're going to start a class as a level 1, hopefully to get into a level 2, where the kids will become familiar with the different programming in the computers that will allow them to create that content. Because quite frankly, the content that we make as adults, the kids look at and they're like, that's not very good. And then they could have a MacBook and throw something together in 5 minutes that's substantially better than anything we put together. So what better avenue than to start an elective for kids to be able to make that content themselves so that they can go out to the stadium and see their own work out there. If you notice that soccer, football, lacrosse, field hockey games all through the fall, you would notice at the end of the videos that were played was a logo of our career tech business and marketing class, because they're already doing it for the school district. So with the amount of work that that class could be doing, they wouldn't do much else. So we decided to make an elective for kids that really want to pursue that. They could get really deep into it. We're excited. And again, then you have the list. The other new course we're going to have is creative writing. Right now, we have a class called effective writing. It's a little bit dated. It's not super popular. We generally don't run more than 1 or 2 sections of it a year. We have 2 teachers that both have degrees from college in some sort of writing, either creative writing or literary publishing, that came up with this proposal to create a true creative writing class. This is going to replace effective writing, and it'll be an opportunity for students to put together, the end product will be a literary magazine that they would release once a semester. It's a half-year class. So we're really excited about that. And the English department hasn't done much with electives because every student has to take 4 years, but we think this one is going to hit students where they could be creative. And then we just have a list of the other classes. New textbooks we're looking at: AP US History, Combo American Government, Concepts American Government, American Government. If you remember, we had AP American Government last year. They're looking at that book, but probably not going to be going with that book, do we think?
It depends which one.
Maybe?
Combo may.
Maybe, okay. Different levels, different books.
The other one-
We look at the Lexiles, as you guys know, when you do the TPEX, we look at the Lexiles to see what's appropriate for the different courses and the level of reader in the class. But they could be 3 different books, they could be 3 of the same books. We'll see once the teachers give us their recommendation. AP Economics is up for one, and Concepts of World Studies. Here's our curriculum revision timeline. You've seen this each year. We condensed it for you. As always, we start the process early in the fall with the department chairs, and then we get moving. So January 31st, right around the end of the second marking period, is when first units are due to first readers, so department chairs or various administrators that will then go through it, because we don't want teachers to spend countless hours rewriting curriculum for then us to say, this is missing the mark, it's missing this, it's missing that. We want them to just give us one unit polished up, and then if there's any issues, we could let them know, or we could say, it's great, go on the other three. We already have them turning in first units. They're used to the process. But you can see the rest of the time frames in terms of textbook evaluation form, when the curricula comes to the district office, when it's sent to the school board for review, and then doing the curricula and new textbooks in June. Okay. Okay. I talked enough. So, does the school board have any questions?
So I do have, I'll be honest, it's a lot.
Well, what we were looking for, honestly, I've sat through some data presentations that have a lot of color-coded charts, and I've seen the glaze as you look at grade level after grade level after, and it's like, we tried to get to the point, is the point. We tried to make it all-encompassing for a one-shot snapshot of the academics of the district for last school year, while addressing performance, but not solely focusing on it, while looking into not only areas of need, but what are the actual action steps that the district is looking into to show improvement. It's one thing to say, we talk about goals all the time. It's one thing to have a goal to get better, but if you don't have an action plan to go with it, you're just wishing. So we really try to hone in on those things. And we wanted you all to be aware of the resources the district uses when making those analyses and determinations of whether it's something we need to improve at or something that we're doing fairly well and just need to maintain. And every year is different. Every group of kids is different.
While discussing future agendas, on 2 occasions, Dr. Blum said to me, I'm so excited about this upcoming presentation, which I knew would have a lot of data. So I was like, okay. Well, I have to say that it was very comprehensive, very revealing. All of the various initiatives last year that you brought to us saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Here's the proof of the pudding. You did it. I do have a question. The what is the link it, and is it metric it? Or e-metric. Do most school districts use that?
Most e-metric is available to everybody. Link it, I would not say most, but I would say most high-performing districts have some product they use for data management.
Because that's revolutionary.
It absolutely
I
is.
have sat through a lot, other members too, a lot of
All of us that have worked in a building before.
This is the most revealing and informative that I have ever observed. It's excellent.
It does make it simplistic, I think, to be useful. What we tried when we started our data analysis, we said, okay, district office level, we are kind of like the canopy. Look at everything. Let's analyze each building. Let's look for just common elements. And then our building principals, we want to empower to know their grade levels and their teachers inside and out. They need to know everything about them. It's not Dr. Cosentino's job to know a particular 3rd grade teacher in Shahola, how their kids performed. That's the principal's job. And then the expectation on the teacher is to know their kids inside out. That's it. They don't have to worry about anything else. Just focus on what your kids' needs are and just try to meet them as best you can. So we tier it so that it's not overarchingly overwhelming on any particular level. It just has to be approached very strategically, because when you look at the amount of data that is compiled in a given year, it is overwhelming unless you take a systematic approach to it.
I see that approach. The subgroup performance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious as to who oversees that. So right after that, you mentioned the collaborative team.
Mm-hmm.
Is that who is looking at the subgroup performance, or is it a particular individual or individual teachers in each room?
It's a great question. Different subgroups, different number of population of students. So if you have like your low socioeconomic students, as we saw on average across the districts, 40%. So that has to be done at the classroom level. When you look at individual students with IEPs, that's something that could be more focused in on either classes that offer more supports and interventions or your resource rooms that offer exclusive interventions for that group of students. So it's really a matter of, when trying to address them, identifying, kind of like you said, the right team for a particular subgroup of students.
It's so diverse. It's massive.
Massive is a good word. Massive is a good word.
Yeah, I'd be interested in, getting them. You're drilling down. This is, I realize you're drilling down into this. That'd be a nice presentation in a year.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Please.
So, not necessarily related to, it's somewhat related to that, the data. But now that we're almost half the way through this year, how have the assistant principals at the elementary level helped to manage all of this data?
Funny, we just had a long conversation about that yesterday. And one of the things that our elementary principals have reflected on is that having assistant principals for all of those principals is new. So a significant amount of their time is teaching their assistants the ropes and teaching administration. I mean, it's a job. And that they all pretty much agreed across the board that having them is useful in the sense that when you are able to give specific tasks and ownership to the assistant principals, it allows the principals to focus on their instructional leadership, which was our goal from the beginning. The challenge, as we knew was going to be, would be having them split between buildings is a challenge. Simply because it's hard to say one assistant principal is going to have all bus discipline. But if you're split between buildings by day, well, who's doing it on Thursday and Friday if you're in a different building? Or if it's only half the day, who's doing the morning bus runs while you're doing the evening bus runs? So that's certainly a challenge. But I think that, I know that, each of the principals said that as the year goes on and the learning curve starts to level out just on the job, more and more time is being freed up for the principals and the APs in some cases to be in classrooms and to be doing deep dives into their grade books to make sure that their teachers are on the right page and meeting with their teachers to offer support and see if there's anything they need. I had a fourth grade teacher from Dvsd email me today a question about PBOS. And she was basically like, sorry if this isn't you. I'm like, no, that's what we want our teachers to think. She's like, I'm looking at my data and I couldn't be happier that she was doing that on her time. So I would say definitely helpful. And over time, I think it'll become more and more helpful as we go.
So this big shift in science, definitely going to have an entirely new approach. Is the state offering any type of professional development, conferences, online type of, so that it's not multi-year? I'd like to get it down to, instead of multiple.
Did you ask her to ask you that question?
No.
Would you like to give an idea of what we've done maybe just in the last 6 months?
We've tried to take advantage of every offering at any point in the state. We have our team of curriculum writers who have been amazing and dug in themselves. We've sent admin at all different levels to different SEALs training, and when you dig in, you find the experts in the state that you really need to connect to. So that's really been very helpful. It is a process. NGSS standards, Pennsylvania was the last state to adjust or update their science standards. So
California, is that like 10 years of this?
13.
13,
NGSS was
yeah.
13 years ago. So when you listen to experts in the field, they're saying it's a 5-year plan. And because it's such a shift, it's the three-dimensional learning. So it's not as much of a shift in content as it is in pedagogy and instruction.
How you teach the
And
science, which is harder for a teacher to adjust to, honestly.
So for example,
Some
in
online lessons.
January 21st, we have the woman from BCIU coming in. She's spending the whole day with our teachers, our curriculum writers. That we're doing that 3 times this year, just in that snapshot. Of course, many Saturdays that we can. We gave the head of science education at PDE a list of questions yesterday that he's going to be working on and trying to connect us with any exemplar school that has really been ahead of it. But at this point, he didn't have a name for us because everyone's July 1st, 2025 is the active date. So as much as we are working towards it, what we're getting the idea is that we are ahead of the curve. And that's it.
And we are.
Teachers and Dr. Pope has been fabulous as the science department chair.
We've tried doing like different things. Like Nicole and I went to a training with a kindergarten and second grade teacher.
And having experts
we sent out 2 high school teachers with Ms. Weller in academic services. We sent our 2 elementary principals together to a training. We have our 2 middle school people.
In February, RIU is offering in February 24th and 25th. Just as much as we can.
And different
Pile
stakeholders.
the resources.
Put everybody together to make it work.
Science is so important. My very last question, the personal finance, is so important. And I know people have been asking for something similar to that for a long time. But could it be done as a self-directed type of course or online if we're going to have a difficult time finding teachers?
Great question.
So many students.
Just sat through a panel discussion on that exact question came up. And the recommendation from the state was if you don't do it for other classes, you shouldn't do it for this class. So if you offer independent coursework, you could do that, or online classes that you could potentially do it. Summer school, so that you don't have to lose an elective during the school year, you could do those types of things.
That's a big improvement for every student.
The other big question was grading and the idea of completing the class. And they said, listen, whatever your handbook says, if completing a class means passing it, they all have to pass it. And that made curriculum and instruction directors, like their faces turned white. But they also, someone brought up, and I actually was speaking to somebody at a table, I said, we use pass-fail for our freshman seminar class. And then someone raised their hand across the room and said, what about pass-fail? And they said, if you use it for other classes, you could do that. Right now, we would lean in that direction. And quite frankly, I'm a little uncomfortable with a mandated class having an impact on GPA as well, because a student's not choosing to be there. I get English, math, science, social studies, fine. But for an elective type class, I'm just a little uncomfortable. And I think pass-fail may be a more successful approach to teaching it. But we're 2 years away. And if our business department or math department, which it'll probably be housed in, decides otherwise, we would let them design it.
Well, and it's not just an elective class, it's a very specific math class.
It is.
Which may not be the route that some of our students would go in an elective. They would not choose to take an additional.
And I think it's the type of class that, depending on some circumstances outside the school district's control, you could be very successful in it, or you could really, really struggle in it, which also makes me uncomfortable from the GPA angle.
Yeah, you had brought this up last year.
Mhm. It's been on the docket.
Right, and we talked about this versus freshman seminar. The thing that occurred to me today too, though, is freshman seminar is 1 month.
It's a quarter.
Right?
Yep.
So, and this would be a full semester.
It has to be at least a 90-day class.
So it's,
We also just found out, and I had no knowledge of this, so it might get fact-checked and be fake news, but we heard that there was an AP personal financial literacy class coming potentially in 2 years, that they're talking about piloting it next year, which could be an option for kids, depending on what that content looks like. So we may be able to offer the mandate in different ways that could benefit our kids, which is kind of always our goal. If they give you lemonade or lemons, make lemonade out. If they give you lemonade, just drink it. But if they are going to give you something you have to do, at least try to make it as beneficial for the kids as possible.
When you say 2026 is starting, with that incoming freshman class, or meaning if you're a senior in 2026, you have to fit that half year in?
Great question. The answer from the state was to be determined. The final bulletin, it's called the PA bulletin that it's on. The final reading is in like the last part of the state process for changing, forgive me, chapter 4, wherever it's going in the PA. This is going in PA school code. And they said those last minute questions like that should be answered at that time. What the person told us at the training was that they said, we would plan to make sure that you're offering it where you want to offer it, but have a plan in place for your seniors to get it.
I can't even begin to address that.
No comment.
I can't even get I mean, there are a lot of juniors now whose senior schedule is pretty much already set.
Yes.
And so throwing a whole semester.
That would be very unfair to the kids.
It would be challenging is an understatement.
I would agree with you. We were asked if there was it was asked if there was a mechanism to test out of the class, and they said there is not, which we had previously talked about exploring, but apparently that's not a thing. But there is still time where it could get fine-tuned to be a little more palatable for school districts, but they said what's in there now is probably where it's going to be, but some of the gray language, like what completing means, could get clarified as we go. So grade level wise, we may see.
Like we had mentioned about the independent work, maybe well, that's not something that we typically offer, at least for those kids who, like, if they do say it has to be for those graduating seniors of that year, at least for maybe that first year or two, like, you know, those seniors and juniors, offering independent work for them so that they don't have to give up, you know.
Absolutely.
That's not something that we want to do long term.
Mm-hmm.
Because
That's the other thing is those kids at those grade levels are taking classes commensurate with their interest and their skills. And so then to usurp that and throw a whole semester of math at them.
And
then
cannot
already
be
proficient at it.
cannot be done in middle school. That was the other one that was asked of. There were good questions were asked. Most were shut down, but that's okay. Something like that, though, is something that we would, if there was any flexibility to give our kids the best option, we're always going to do that. And no matter what we have to do to make it work, we'll make it work, as opposed to having a senior with a full schedule have to lose an AP to take a half-year elective that they're going to have to backfill with another half-year elective they're probably not interested in. It just doesn't seem fair. So we'll see.
Keep on your toes.
PD certainly does.
It's a great merging of various tools to help us identify students and having the needs, the skills of students, and just having been on the board for as long as I have, I've seen many changes occur with assessments. And I always go back to a student who was in 6th grade, and the reading program that we used at that time in the middle school did not have an assessment to accompany it. So there would be this consistent 80%, 80%, and I would say, what's going on? Is it vocabulary? Is it inferencing? Where is the need? And we couldn't identify it. Now I look at that, link it, and oh my goodness, especially for our subgroups, I'm pretty excited how it's going to help with those. You can drill right in there now, and you're going to identify where the weaknesses are. And it's a big goal on your part, but it's obvious you're going to do it. So.
Well, the one thing I will say, and I'll speak on behalf of the administrative team as well as our department chairs and all of our teachers, they're not scared of failure because they know if we try something, if we're looking at data and we try a new program, a new reading program, and we give it a shot and it doesn't work, we're going to pivot and do something else. We're not just going to keep banging our heads against the wall doing the same thing over and over. And I appreciate the fact that the people are kind of built that way to be malleable and flexible to say, okay, let's be honest, this didn't work. But we could be honest about it. Now let's move on and try something else. What's our next best option? And I think having that mentality, again, you're always going to have peaks and valleys. Not every year is going to have every single building with a large increase, but you celebrate it when it happens. And when it doesn't happen, you identify what went differently and then you adjust. That's all you can do.
Anybody else?
Tremendous results. I mean, the results are really.
Well, I just want to finalize the presentation by saying that this district is very fortunate to have a superintendent who shines in understanding the data and all of these new adventures that I'm seeing in education. You helped me to understand the numbers. We're very fortunate, the grant, and Jason, I know you pursue a tremendous amount of grants, so I realize that this is more than just one person, but it has culminated into something that I can understand, and I hope that others can, and if not, I know they can come to you and get that information. So I feel we are very, very fortunate, and I thank you for the work you put into this.
Yeah, this is a total team effort. And the one thing I will say that I think is clearly quantifiably present now is that the restructuring itself was successful. Again, doesn't have to be every year, but seeing what we saw in 1 year when we are just beginning the process, I think is fairly exciting. But having people that could simply focus on academics as their job, having someone that could write grants for teachers to get better materials for the district to get things like Lincoln and in all sorts of avenues is just invaluable. And there's just never been that aggressive pursuit of those things in the past. And I think it's really just a team effort. And I was very proud of the team when we were able to share the results with them. And then the principals were very proud to then at their faculty meetings share with their teachers how they did. So it's good.
Now I get it.
Now you get it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That is not one of my strong points. I'm getting better. Order. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
Motion.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion to accept the bills for payment, which include the general fund, cafeteria fund, and capital reserve fund?
Motion.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion to approve the personnel items including resignations, appointments, change of status, and uncompensated leave? Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of additional volunteers?
Motion. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. May I have a motion to approve the tax collector's compensation for 2026-27, 2027-28, 2028-29, 2029-2030 as per your attachment?
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just want to thank Mr. Hessling for laying this all out for us. Just helpful to see all the numbers. So thank
Hard to
you.
remember, we gotta do it every 4 years. And it's, you gotta do it so far in advance of when they run for election. Right. But thank you.
Thank
And a
you.
thank you to the tax collectors.
You do a good job.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion to approve the resolution pertaining to the 2025-2026 general fund budget of the Delaware Valley School District as per Act 1 of the special session 2006 entitled the Taxpayer Relief Act?
Motion.
Any discussion?
Second.
I'm sorry, may I have a second? May I have a second?
I got it.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of the expulsion of student 2024-2025 3000241 for 45 days?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. So we have announcements. January 9th, 2025, we have a work session at 6 o'clock p.m. at the Delaware Valley Administrative Office. January 14th, 2025, a work session for the presentation of the 2023-2024 audit, which is at 8 o'clock a.m. at the Delaware Valley Administrative Offices. January 16th, 2025 is our regular board meeting at 6 o'clock, also at the Delaware Valley Administrative Office. And now we will move into public comment. Please state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes to address the board on whatever you like. But that's up to you.
I'd rather sit. My name's Danielle Tropiano. My husband, Anthony, and I have 4 children, 3 of which are currently attending the Delaware Valley Elementary School, and 1 who will be attending kindergarten next year. Our son is 8 years old and is in 3rd grade. He's a type 1 diabetic and is diagnosed at 3 years old. Our daughter is 4 years old and will be attending DVES next year. She's also a type 1 diabetic and was diagnosed earlier this year. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease in which the body is unable to produce insulin. Insulin regulates the amount of sugar in the blood. In order to keep our son and daughter healthy, we use a CGM, which is continuous glucose monitor. It monitors their blood glucose levels at all times during the day. More importantly, the CGM allows us to see the trends in their sugar and act quickly to avoid episodes of hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar, and hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar. Unfortunately, the district does not recognize the importance of the device and has in the past allowed our son's sugar to hit dangerous lows and unnecessary highs, causing him to spend an inconceivable amount of time in the nurse's office. Technology is ever changing, and it's time that the district adapts in order to meet the needs of all of our students. These type 1 children do not have to live a life of long-term health problems anymore. In August 2023, we'd written a letter to the board which explained in detail the concerns that we had. Our son had a very difficult 2022-2023 school year where his health was being impacted and his academics were being overlooked. We pleaded with the district to please step up and help accommodate the needs of our son. Our letter was not acknowledged by anyone, and the many meetings and phone calls, with the administration gave us no results. These type 1 children fight battles daily that no child should ever have to deal with. With our 4-year-old coming up, we're pleading once again that the board reconsider their protocol when it comes to managing these type 1 children. We appreciate the work that you do, and we thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, Jennifer Jarvis. What she said. I'm all talked out on the topic, so what she said, and please, let's get it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you. And now we'll move to the board. Any comments from the board?
Oh, is there, do we need to circle back?
Yes, so I apologize, there was an error in the approvals on the expulsion of student 3000241. It's actually for 180 days, it says through the end of the first marking period of 25-26. Do we need to read?
Yeah, we can just redo the motion. Yep.
Okay.
So 180 days through the end of the first.
May I have a motion for the approval of the expulsion of student 2024-2025 3000241 for 180 days?
Motion. Second. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there any discussion?
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. And thank you.
That was a nice catch by Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you. Are there any closing comments from the board?
I just very quickly, I forgot to mention that Mrs. Matarazzo, Dr. Cosentino, and Mrs. Sweller, they came up with the idea of the blue Hershey Kisses, and what they did was they put them in all of our teachers' mailboxes, because in PBOS, blue is the significant growth that a teacher can achieve. So they went through the whole district, and any teacher that was in the blue category, they put them in their mailboxes with a little note. I forgot to mention that that's what you were saying, but the teachers were very appreciative.
It's the first I've seen blue wrappers on that. Anybody else?
I had a question about the meeting schedule. And I had talked to Nick and Pam about it, but I just wanted to bring it up to the rest of the board. As far as, were you able to contact
I
PSBA?
totally forgot. As soon as you started talking, I was like, sorry.
So I had asked Nick to look into, and I don't even know if it's something that the rest of the board and admin would even be amenable to, but when we had our November meeting and we had to cancel because of the weather, I had asked at that point about potentially doing a Zoom meeting, especially for a month like November where it was really difficult to get that meeting in, is, pivoting, and maybe if we advertised our winter meetings as potentially being able to be via Zoom if there's inclement weather, that might be, if we're already planning to be at a meeting, it might be easier for board members and admin, instead of rescheduling, to meet via Zoom. I know Nick was going to look into it. I did look into Office of Open Records, and it does say online that townships and municipalities cannot meet via Zoom. They have to have a quorum in person, but there's a case about milk marketing that a quorum of members can consist of members not physically present at the meeting, but who nonetheless participate in the meeting as long as there's two-way communication. Such a quorum can take official action provided that the absent members are able to hear the comments of and speak to all those present at the meeting. So it does look like it may only be
For townships and municipalities.
Okay. So, but I'm not sure if that's anything that even the board is interested in you first. Like, I feel bad making you look something up if nobody else is even interested. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's
Having
worth.
it.
I think it's worth looking up as opposed to just canceling.
Yeah.
Right.
It's as simple as sending an email to PSBA asking for
Okay.
the position. I have no problem doing that.
Well, like I said, I mean, if nobody else was interested, then I hate to, but I don't even know how we would have to advertise that, because I think we would have to advertise that it could be.
I think we
Via
start.
Zoom.
If Nick gets good information from PSBA, I think we start with the meeting's policy, and I think then you could address some of the contingencies in the policy, and then just reference back to the
So our
policy.
policy already allows it.
It allows it, but it doesn't give any guidance or stipulations for it when I checked. It
No,
just says
because
it
we
could
took all
happen.
the stipulations out, I think, because of COVID.
No,
So,
correct.
Yeah,
Because of COVID, though.
right.
So I think if that's something you wanted to move towards, like you're reading things of what has to happen, then those are the things you'd want to put into the policy.
So there would only be, okay.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
Not as every other month we don't feel like leaving our houses, but for
No,
a
but
snowstorm when you have Thanksgiving coming up. I think it was kind of the perfect storm in November to bring it to your attention. So I appreciate you bringing that point. I think it's a valid question.
So from policy and Nick will pursue it.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
so
Thank you for the reminder.
The answer, we can put it on the work session.
I was gonna say, please bring the policy to the
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
January work session.
My last page. Any other comments?
I just want to thank Chief Mobley. Did a great presentation about the current drug trends. Unfortunately, it was poorly attended, but he is willing to do it as many times as needed. And I know he's already talking with some PTAs to get that brought in. And I recommended to the Systems of Care and Pike Monroe and Carbon to reach out to you to see about spreading the word, because it was really very interesting, the things that were discussed that I had no idea. So I hope that more parents in the future will take advantage of learning what to look for, what to be aware of, because the problem is not growing in school, it's coming into the school, and we need to know what to look for outside of school to prevent it from coming here. So it's not the school's issue created. Parents need to be involved as well to make sure that we're doing our part to help in ending this stuff that's going on.
I am scheduled to do it again for the Damon Middle School and Delaware Valley Middle School PTAs next month.
Excellent. It's been a very busy month. So when is that being offered?
The
Have you decided yet?
15th and the 22nd, I believe.
Okay.
15th,
I
I
heard it
think,
was
is at
excellent, so.
DV Middle School, and the 22nd will be at Damon Middle School.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandy. Anybody else? Okay. Have a motion to adjourn? And all those in favor say aye. Any opposed?